Well, happy Easter, VCC. I am coming to you from the last unfinished room of my house. There is a fitting reason why I'm in here. I want to talk to you today about an empty tomb. And in essence, this room is not exactly empty as far as it has different things in storage, but it is sort of the last room of our house that has no purpose, that is empty. And so I hope you'll forgive the lack of color and beauty, but hopefully the message will ring true. I want to ask you today to think to your greatest day. What is the greatest day of your life? I know it's tough to choose just one, so I'll even give you a second to perhaps formulate a top five. For myself, there are quite a few. I remember the last day of university. I remember that last assignment that I handed in, how great it felt to be done school. Until, of course, I realized that I had become a teacher and I would be going back to school quite soon after that, but obviously on the other side of the classroom. Obviously getting married, our wedding day, that was phenomenal. Both births of our sons were incredible. There have been many great days. How do we commemorate these great days? How do we remember them? How do you remember the greatest day of your life? How do you celebrate it? How do you make sure that it's festive, not just for you, but for your loved ones, and that the memory of it stays true? A couple of weeks ago, we were doing the kids' lessons. Props to Ashley. Thanks for keeping our kids taught during this season. And I just love the time we now share with our boys around the table, reviewing the material. And we were doing the lesson about Joshua crossing the Jordan with the Israelites, and how once they crossed, God told them to choose 12 stones, and for each tribe to position a stone there as a commemoration. What a great way for future generations to know what God had done for them. I was reading recently about the Israelites as they left Egypt, and how on the night of the Passover, God told them that this would now become the first day of their year. This would be the first calendar day. In essence, it would become their New Year's Day. What a way to commemorate what God had done for them. And we continue this sort of charge to commemorate great days of our lives. Well, Easter Sunday is the greatest day. It is the greatest day that this world has ever seen and ever known. And we do commemorate it as a church. We perhaps commemorate it as families. But I want to ask you this morning as an individual, how do you remember Easter Sunday? How do you remember the greatest day that has ever been? We are at a time where governments are starting to talk about reopening economies. And I heard recently that there's talk about reopening schools before the school year's out. The different politicians around the world are recognizing the need to open up their economies to make sure that they don't crash and they don't die. And it just got me thinking that we've been learning so much during this quarantine season. We've been seeing so much in our own hearts, and being able to examine and redefine perhaps even what are our priorities in life. And I was wondering, what will we do when we leave this quarantine? What will we do? How will we commemorate what we've been through? Now, that seems like a jump away from talking about Easter Sunday morning, but just give me a moment and I'll tie them together. As I was reading through Exodus, I was struck about the plague with the frogs in Exodus 8. And it was such a horrible plague on Egypt. The frogs filled their homes, filled the rivers, filled their pots. And Pharaoh confessed and his failings, his sins, and asked God to remove the plague. And God did. God removed the plague. And we daily pray that God would lift this plague from our world. We daily pray that this virus would be removed, that God would stop it. And in Exodus 8, there's this sort of tragic verse that says that once Pharaoh saw there was relief, he hardened his heart. He hardened his heart. Once he saw there was relief. And I was wondering, as we leave this quarantine, as we leave, and we will leave, this will pass. This time will pass. I wonder if my heart will be hardened. Maybe not to the extent that Pharaoh's heart was hardened, but I wonder if I will, like for example, I can't wait to do church again together on a Sunday morning. I can't wait for us to come together. But how many Sundays will it take before it becomes routine again? How many weeks will it take before the task and the work removes a little bit of the enthusiasm? Right now, believe it or not, I can't wait to go to work. I can't wait to go back and teach the students. But how long will that last? And so I want to sort of find a way to put up stones like Joshua did in my life. I want to find ways to mark what I've learned during this quarantine time, and I'm still learning. I want to make sure that the things I now appreciate, I mean, we take daily walks as a family, and I love those walks. Will those walks continue? Will I slowly, as other things become available to distract me, will I lose how special those walks have become? And I see that in Pharaoh, and for him it was quite quick, it was quite drastic, but in us it can happen too, even if it's not quite as fast. As I was thinking about Easter Sunday and the resurrection, I was reading through the Gospels, and in John 20 verse 10, there's a very interesting verse. It's right after the disciples saw the empty tomb. Right after they saw that empty tomb, the verse says they returned to their homes. They went back to life. They went back to doing what they did every day. And so it's a real danger for us to leave this time and forget all the lessons that we learned. I think when the Israelites left Egypt, that's why God said, hey, mark your calendar from now on. This is your January 1st. So you'll always know why. You'll always know why this was the first day. Well, here we are in 2020. Why is it 2020? I mean, we all know it's 2020 because last year was 2019. But the world is older than 2020 years. Why is it 2020? Because those generations following the resurrection, those individuals that had cultural sway and influence, they decided that they needed to mark their experience. They needed to mark their transition out of a former way of life. And they decided that Jesus' life, his birth, his death, his resurrection, that would be the stone that would mark that things were now different, that things were now new, that they would now be forever changed. And we still, well, those of us oldies that write checks, we still testify to that fact when we put the year on our check. When we print our agendas at school, the year is there testifying that the life of Jesus, his birth, his death, and his resurrection has forever marked this world. Now, what about us? What about us as an individual? And the reason I'm in this empty room in my house, I said that Easter is the greatest day ever. If you stopped me on the street and asked me to list the 5 greatest days of my life, I'll be honest, I'm not sure Easter would make it. I'm not sure that I would instinctively give that response. And I feel challenged by that truth. I feel challenged that I can recognize that the fact that Jesus was raised from the dead is the most pivotal aspect of my faith. And so I feel that I need to change my priorities. I feel that I need to change my the way I remember, the way I commemorate. and truly define Easter as the greatest day ever, not just historically, not just theologically, but personally, on a personal level. The fact that Jesus died and was raised again, that should change every aspect of who I am as a man, as a person, as an individual. And so I want all of us, as we reflect today on Easter Sunday and what it means to appreciate the true impact of his resurrection. Back in Exodus, the Passover meal that as Christians we recognize was foreshadowing what Jesus would do. It's so interesting that God says to them after they leave, he says, now that you're out, separate to me the firstborn. They're all mine. And so we understand that because the firstborn in Egypt had perished, that made the firstborn of all of Israel unto God, that they now belong to God. And so the death of the Lamb represented that now Israel was his. God's desire all along has been to have his own people that he can call his own. And so when Jesus died, that was to God the moment that now we became his. He sees us as his own. And so the question I leave us with today is not what part of my life will I now give God? What new effort will I make? What new sacrifice will I make? I leave us with this thought. It's not about a part of my life that's his. It's that all of my life is his. He sees all of our lives as his own because his son died. And the fact that he didn't leave his son in the grave means that he plans to redeem all of us. And this is why it's the greatest day in history, the day that God the Father raised his son from the dead. I know we don't believe that as a culture really today anymore, do we? But as Christians, this is the central idea. This is the most important element of our faith, that Jesus has been raised from the dead, because it shows that God is not just trying to clean me up in my day-to-day functions, but he's saving me for eternity with him. He sees me as his own. He sees you as his own. And that's the message of Good Easter. That's the message of Easter Sunday, that now, because of the death of his son, he sees us as his own. Oh man, I belong to him. You belong to him. And as we go about our lives, as we return to our homes like the apostles, that night of the resurrection, Jesus appeared in their gathering place. They went home, but he appeared there where they were gathered together. And my prayer is that we would know him in our homes. My prayer is that we would know him in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, that he would appear to us, perhaps not literally, but put his spirit in our homes, that our homes would be a place of peace. Put his spirit in our minds and in our heart, that we would be what the Bible describes is his goal, tabernacles for him, a place for him to reside. Oh, what a beautiful message. Today is the greatest day in history, and I pray that it is the greatest day of your lives as well, and that you would know him. I bless you all, my VCC family. Happy Easter. And I'm just going to close in prayer now and pray a blessing on all of us. Father, I thank you for what this day is. I thank you for what you gave, not just flippantly, but you gave in order that we would become yours. You gave so that we could be yours. And so maybe in our hearts, it's like the room that I'm standing in right now. There's some unfinished places. There's some places that still need some work. And Lord, I ask that you would come now and work on those areas of our hearts. And so, Father, thank you once again. I bless you and I love you. VCC, I bless you and I love you. And for friends or family that have received this video as a link, I bless you too, and I pray for you too. And I hope that this will become your greatest day ever. God bless you all.